So, for a view on new powers, on whether ASIO should be given those powers, I'm joined by Dr. Tobias Feakin, a senior analyst from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Dr. Feakin, weigh this up for us, the pros and cons, because on the surface of it, it sounds like quite a good argument to protect national security, and yet it sounds like an encroachment on privacy.
Sure, it's a big question in the public's eye right now. I mean, really where this originates from is a review of various parts of Australian national security legislation, which has been tabled for approximately 2 years now. Now, last year there was a report that went into the Parliamentary Intelligence and Security Committee tabling about 44 different measures, and this is one slice of that, if you like, and this part really is about updating ASIO's powers in line with modern communications technology and also ICT, computer technology as well, and you can understand that you know, agencies need to be able to keep up to date with technology to be able to do their jobs, and I don't think anyone in the public would begrudge the fact that, you know, if there are people there with terrorist intent or criminal intent, that you know, police or the agency should be able to actually carry out their work. But I guess, you know, the big question is that with that comes great responsibility. You know, great power requires great responsibility, and you need to be reassured that with these kinds of powers comes, you know, appropriate oversight, and if someone misuses that kind of power, that there will be some kind of, you know, comeback on them should they do so.
And there are some terrific examples of that, particularly overseas, aren't there, of that information being misused?
Well, certainly, you know, you're referring here to Snowden and the NSA. Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, Australia does have some fairly rigid oversight mechanisms, which, you know, I think actually the government would do well to really bring the public into this discussion more and make them more aware of the oversight mechanisms that exist. Obviously, it doesn't make as interesting a story as Snowden revelations, but, you know, a core part of the Australian democracy is that, you know, it has an intelligence agency, but it does also have stringent oversight mechanisms.
In this post-Snowden world, I guess, to the layperson, we would assume that we're all being watched all the time anyway. Give us some insight into why these powers are needed. What is it in the mechanism of the way the surveillance operations work that ASIO, for instance, needs these extra powers?
Sure. Well, it's about being able to gather the right amount of data in order that you can prosecute and have a true understanding of what someone with real intent is going to be doing. I think, you know, there's a common assumption in light of Snowden that you know, members of the public would feel like everyone's watching them, and especially the government is. I mean, it would simply kind of overwhelm the government from a financial point of view. They would simply not have the staffing to be able to look at all of our data every minute of every day. This is about for targeted operations on people who are suspected of very serious crimes, to be able to access data which would create part of that evidential chain in order that you can then prosecute that individual.
You mentioned earlier that some of these matters were considered by the previous government. Do you then expect that these measures would get some degree of bipartisan support if the government tries to push them through, given the terrorism climate that exists in Syria and Iraq at the moment?
Sure, I think, you know, you've already seen it in some of the newspaper reporting today that it is already getting bipartisan support. You know, Labour ministers have already, Shadow Cabinet have already come out and said that they supported this, and it's something that they were looking at years ago. I think it's just coming to a head. Often, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, these things are brought to a head by events, and obviously what's going on in Iraq and Syria has really sharpened the attention. What I would say, though, is that when, you know, anybody is given extensive powers like this, that it needs to be reviewed quite regularly, and if it's found that powers like this aren't required in the future, then, you know, a liberal democracy, the very nature of it should be that it's self-questioning and shouldn't be afraid to rescind on powers that perhaps are no longer required.
And that's the key to selling this to the public, isn't it?
I think it is. It's a process of continual review, continual legal oversight, and reassuring the public that, yes, these are quite intrusive powers, but there are checks, balances and measures, and indeed a review process at the end, which will make sure that they're not abused.
All right, Tobias Feakin, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.